In 2015, the Committee on Early Childhood, Adoption, and Dependent Care received 4.1 million reports of child maltreatment in the United States. Of those abused, roughly 143,000 received foster care. American society has made many strides to help children in need by creating the child welfare system, otherwise known as the foster care system. Children are moved out of dangerous situations and homes into foster families who are volunteering to take care of children who don't have access to proper care in their biological home. They're government funded, and this is supposed to be a good thing, but a lot of the time foster families and foster homes are abusive towards foster children. In an investigation of foster care runaways by the organization Fostering Perspectives, 1 in 6 children who ran away reported it was because they felt unsafe in their foster placement. That was in North Carolina alone. In a report from the Children's Bureau in 2014, there were approximately 415,000 children in the system. If 16% of children felt unsafe in their homes based on the measure of children in 2014, that means there are roughly 66,000 children in foster care who are feeling unsafe and possibly are being abused in their foster home. Foster homes are supposed to be safe places for abused and neglected children, but this is not the case for many of them. The abuses in the foster system are under-recognized, and not only is maltreatment of children a serious issue, but it has lasting effect on a child's psychological standing. This could have serious impacts on their future. Children are an important aspect of society, and the children in foster care make up a large percentage of those children in the U.S. today. Their futures are our futures. Long term, this will affect bigger outlets in American society, including higher education, adults who can achieve long-term careers to support the next generation, as well as adding to the homeless community in society. So reform of the foster care system has already occurred, but research indicates that there's much more to do. To narrow down foster care abuse, I'm going to talk about the history of the system and work my way towards 2018. So foster care originally stemmed from orphanages. The Adoption History Project said the term foster was supposed to contrast with institutional care, which would be orphanages. But the fostering was supposed to provide family structure to children who had poor or non-existent family structure at all, or family care. A lot of the kids were pulled off the streets, so many of them were homeless. They were thrown out by their parents. Nobody wanted them. They were dying of starvation, sickness, stuff like that, because this was back in the 19th century. So they would remove children from these poor conditions and put them in orphanages, but a lot of orphanages did not have good conditions either. Henry Dwight Chapin, who was a pediatrician and a founder of one of the first foster care agencies, said that orphanages, quote, literally sickened and killed alarming numbers of children, end quote. It was on that realization that Chapin and his wife created the Children's Aid Society, which was the first foster care agency in the United States. This led to eventually the end of orphanages and the prominent use of foster care in the 19th century up until now. But the new system isn't without its flaws. There are still a lot of issues along the lines of abuse for foster care children, so it never truly stopped, even though orphanages were the worst thing. It just continued. So today, the Children's Bureau lists foster care rights on their website as one of them being the right to be free from cruel, frightening, or unsafe discipline, and the right to be protected from abuse and neglect. There are also crisis helplines through the Bureau that are provided for children if they're in danger or if their rights are violated. But laws, unfortunately, more often than not, are not created because we're trying to prevent things. It's because things have already happened, which means the foster care abuse has always been an issue. And often in reaction to abuse, children will run away, as I discussed earlier. But Fostering Perspectives survey concluded children don't often leave the system by running away, which means they end up back in the system regardless of leaving or trying to leave, because many of them have nowhere to go. So they call their social worker or their friends or their previous foster homes, and of course CPS has to put them back where they were originally because that's the way the system works. So it doesn't fix the problem, it actually creates more, and when a child runs away from a home, they could get lost, kidnapped, or even killed. So it's not fixing the problem long-term or short-term. The government has recognized these risks, and they've been attempting to reform since the time of orphanages, obviously, and ending them was the first step, but foster care left the hands of volunteer organizations a long time ago, and so there's not a lot that we can do personally. On a personal level, the government has to recognize it more. In his journal, Michael Wald discusses other foster care reform that's happened, so the government is making strides to do so. In 1980, the Child Welfare Act passed, and that established the requirements for reasonable efforts to avoid removal, which essentially means if a parent can support their child and treat their child as they should, then that child will not be removed and put into foster care. In theory, that would reduce the amount of children in the foster care system, but it also could just potentially leave more children in abusive homes, which is the opposite of what the purpose was when creating the foster care system. Another reform is that, so nowadays when CPS places children in the system, like in homes, they try to keep it in biological family. So instead of putting a child with a stranger, they'll put them with aunts, uncles, siblings that don't live in the home anymore, grandparents, friends, somebody that the child knows, instead of putting them with a complete stranger. It helps for them to feel more comfortable, but unfortunately, if none of these people are available, then the children are placed with strangers. So that is one issue that hasn't completely been resolved. Another issue is that sometimes foster care families want to adopt, but they can't. So there are various reasons why, but one of them is a birth parent might come back and want custody of that child again, and the court has to agree if they meet the requirements to return the child to their birth family. That was established in the case Smith versus Offer, which basically argued that the child should always be returned to the birth family if the circumstances are appropriate and the birth parent demands it. This splits apart foster homes that are actually good homes, and a lot of the time it causes undue hardship on both the foster parents and the foster family, as well as the child that's being returned to the birth family, because they could have been separated from their birth family for years without any contact whatsoever. But the foster parents don't have a choice in this matter because they're government funded and their feelings are definitely not considered when it comes to the law, unfortunately. Foster care reform is also undersupported by the public. In 1981, $200 million was proposed to reform the foster care system, and according to Sheila Rule in the New York Times, lack of support decreased the amount to $185 million. Putting the system for reform on the back burner also puts those kids there too, and a lot of these children are left in abusive homes because the government is not doing proper investigation. But it's good to keep in mind that children are the future of the country, and reform is still needed to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to succeed in life. Foster kids are not set up for success, so frequent home changes, when they're pulled out of their homes, often that changes the school that they go to, and it affects their education. So in his TED Talk, Robert Duke discusses education of foster care children, and his research showed that 84% of foster care children, when asked, said they wanted to go to college, but only 50% graduated at age 18, and only 4% received a college degree. College is an ingrained part of society, obviously, or we wouldn't be here, but long-term lack of education for anyone reduces job opportunities, career opportunities, and it can even lead to homelessness, which sounds like a long shot, but follow me here. So in her brief public health report, Dr. Cheryl Zlotnick found that 48.7% of people who had children in foster care had a history of homelessness. Everything has a connection, even down to the extremes, and because the foster care system is the way it is, without providing these children with opportunities through long-term homes, a lot of them end up not having a home to live in at all. With that being said, what can be done? So for one, background checks of foster care parents is extremely important because no one's going to know if nobody reports a home that the parents are abusing the children. And so there's just a constant cycle of children in and out of an abusive home. So that is one thing that needs to change. Another that needs to change is frequent relicensing and re-examining of every foster parent that is signed up through the governmental program. So by relicensing everyone, everybody has to be like reevaluated, and that would prevent like future abuse. It would prevent more children coming into homes and being abused or running away or any of those issues that I discussed before. And for another, elimination of homes with a history of abuse needs to happen. There are too many homes where elimination doesn't happen, and a child that is abused is pulled out of the home, put in a different one, and more children are brought into the abusive home. And so the cycle just continues forever, and more kids are being affected by this abuse. So doing these things, it won't eliminate all abuse, but it will decrease it. And it's true that you can't save every child, but saving one is a good place to start. Thank you.